Yo, what is up YouTube? It's your boy Slow-Mo Eli back with another video today, and as you can see by the title, we're talking about Supercharged versus Turbocharged 370Zs. I did do a poll on Instagram, which I'll poll right here. I'm just trying to gauge my audience, see what y'all are interested in, so I can continue making videos that everybody wants to see, and keep doing that. I just need you guys to subscribe, like, drop a comment down below, let me know what you want to see, let me know your takeaways from the video, all that stuff, just so we can keep this content flowing. I'm on a roll, as you guys can see. I'm dropping back-to-back videos. I'm trying to keep it up while the car is down. 500 subscribers is the goal. I want to get 500 subscribers by the end of next month. I know it's definitely possible because we're moving at such a fast rate right now. We're doing pretty decent. Like I've been looking over my stuff here, and last video we're already at like almost 300 views and just dropped it. 300 views, I would say, in a day for a channel that's pretty brand new. I would say that's good stuff right there. So I want to, carry on this momentum, blow it up a little bit, because when the car is out, we're going to have so much content. Like, I'm going to have videos for you guys constantly. We're going to be out gapping R8s and Hellcats and Paul, because his 5.0 is slow. But, yeah, appreciate you guys for tuning in, and without further ado, let's get into the video. Alright, so let's get right into it. I did have 5 categories that I wanted to go ahead and base my, decision on which one is better. You guys already know my opinion is Turbocharger is better. But, I want to give Supercharger a fair chance here. So I did 5 categories. We're going to do feel, reliability, head turn factor, modularity, and racing. So let's jump right into feel. So we all know, turbos, often they have a boost lag. For the large majority of cars, you're going to have boost lag. You're going to have to wait for that turbo to be spooled. Even if you have a little bit of a smaller turbo, it may not just go right off the hit. You probably got to brake boost it, or, do this or that. I would say with the superchargers, you go in, just mash the pedal, as long as you're in the right gear, of course. You drop it down to second gear for a 40, third gear for a 60, whatever, and you're gonna go. Turbocharger, you gotta give it a little second for it to, make its power, unless you're brake boosting, which is then hard on your brakes. And are you gonna do that every single time? I would say, if you want to just be a spirited driver, I'd say Supercharger all day. So I'm gonna give Supercharger the go for feel. All right. Now let's get into reliability. So this one, it could go either way. This one might be a little bit of opinion based, but I would say with the Supercharger, the way a Supercharger works, it's, at least for the Z's, we don't have like roof style blowers or anything like that. It's kind of like Pro Chargers. There's a lot of different kits out there. There's a Stillen, Z1, Top Guns, and Soho Motorsports. I think those are the 4 people that make kits for these cars, and it's all just belt driven. So imagine like a turbocharger kind of, and it just has a belt on the back side of it that's making that blower spin. So the faster your RPMs are, it correlates with your your speed, pretty much. The okay, output of the impeller is making. So I would say, there's only a few fail points for that. The belt snapping, I would say that's obviously one. And then the housing, if it doesn't get enough oil, you starve it of oil. But that's almost impossible, I feel like. I've never heard of anybody doing that. Turbocharger, on the other hand, there's so many different fail points. I personally have experienced this. You might be racing, doing 100 miles an hour or something like that, and you just blow a coupler off. Like it just makes too much boost, over boosts a little bit. Boom, coupler flies off. Now you're going from 100 miles an hour, and then the car just falls flat on its face. So it just feels like, damn, I was making 700 horsepower, now I'm making like 2. I would say another decent issue is overheating. Turbochargers generate a lot of heat since they get their power from the exhaust system. It can create a lot of heat since you're recycling it and stuff like that. It's a heat monster whenever you're dealing with a turbo. That being said, I would say another big notable thing is I'd say the risk for fire. You know, a lot of people don't really think about that, but I never see supercharged cars catching on fire. Whenever I'm on Instagram or YouTube and stuff like that, I see turbocharged cars catching on fire so often. And think about it, if you got a turbo that's being oiled and stuff like that, you know, maybe a fitting is a little bit loose or something like that, and we're talking about just how much heat it generates, that heat plus oil, fire. You know, you don't really have that too much with a blower car, so I'm going to give reliability to the supercharger just for the simple fact that there's less that could go wrong, and the stuff that does go wrong, it's not as catastrophic. So let's give it the supercharger. Head turn factor. This one is a tough one. So I would say, you know, head turn factor, there's a lot that plays into that. There's looks, obviously, but there's also sound. That's the part that gets a little tough, you know. It's very opinion based, obviously, but I personally, for the large majority of like VQs, I would say supercharger sounds better than turbo. I know that's crazy. You guys are probably gonna go crazy in the comments, be like, nah, bro, my turbo, you know, it's got the sound, all this and that, whatever. I don't want to hear it. Me personally, I think supercharged car, you know, you pull up somewhere and that sound, the blower, you know, or that little bit of whine that you get from just the belt. Like, I enjoy that sound, and it's more constant, you know. Like, you're not making that sound with a turbo in the parking lot just driving normally, you know, unless you're being a weirdo revving your car up, you know, getting a little bit higher up in the RPM for those sounds. You're not getting that. Supercharger, you know, you could be 5 miles an hour and you're gonna hear that blow off valve freaking, you know, the entire way. So I would say sound, I'm gonna give it there. But, you know, head turn factor is also about looks. You know, you pull up to a 370Z and you've got a stillen kit in there, whatever. I'd say that looks very boring in my opinion. You know, like you got a little belt and you've got a little different intake manifold, whatever. But let's say you pull up to my car, you know, I've got a top mount turbo, there's an exhaust hanging out the hood. It just looks cooler. I don't know. You know, it's got the turbo guard on there, and it's got the, you know, what is that called? The Funk Motorsports. You got your heat shielding over the backside of the hot side of the turbo. You know, I think that looks cool. You know, I pull up and I'm like, damn, that's a cool car. You know, I see a car with a turbo, I'm like, damn, that's tough. Not as much with a supercharged car, you know. Yeah, it's still cool, whatever, but it just doesn't have that same kind of appeal in my opinion. And being that, you know, turbos do sound good, they just inherently do sound good.
That's crazy.
Say not as much as a supercharger, but that it has both going for it. I'm gonna give head turn factor to turbo car, so I'll throw one over there. Right now we're 2-1, supercharged car in the lead, but maybe not for long. I'll say modularity. So for y'all that don't know what modularity is like the ability to swap things around. Let's say, you know, my turbo kit, you know, I can go throw another turbo on there. I can go throw a 64 whatever on there, and it's a smaller turbo. I'll be able to get different results out of that. You know, I can get a little faster spool, you know, maybe a little bit less top end. You know, I can go do a twin turbo setup, have like instant boost, and I could still make top end. You know, I can do mid mount, rear mount. There's so much modularity with a turbo kit. I could change out my manifolds. You know, there's just so much that you can swap around. Supercharger kit, on the other hand, not so much. You kind of get what you get out of the box, and there's like little stuff that you can change. You know, you might want to, you know, pulley down to make a little bit more boost. You know, you can only go so small of a pulley. You know, there's only so much that you can do. You're not going to be able to run a quarter-sized pulley. You know, that's just not happening. I would say also, you know, you can do like a cog kit. You know, like there's a lot of people out there that do that. You know, they switch out their regular belt. You know, it's just a regular pulley or whatever for a cog-shaped pulley, and it kind of like pulls the belt instead, so you don't really get belt slip and less chance of your belt snapping. But modularity, that's an easy one. I'm going to give that to the turbo, so we're 2-2 right now. Right there, boom. Yeah, I know. I probably should have did this like on like an actual like edit, but I'm not good at editing, so y'all gotta, you know, watch me draw my little sticks and stuff like that. Last but not least, racing. You know, this is honestly a little bit controversial, but not really. It just depends on what kind of racing I feel like you're doing. So there's a lot of cars out there, you know, everybody that does roll racing, you know, 60 to 130 times. I'm going to post my 60 to 130 on my black car, the supercharged car, show you guys that. That's 585 horsepower, let's say, and the car probably weighed sub 3,000. I would say less than 3,000 pounds because I tin canned that car, took everything I could take out of it pretty much, and it was only able to do like I think like a 6.9 something. That's fast for a supercharged car. There's guys out there that make 700 horsepower on these cars, and they'll be around that time. So that car is definitely, I would say, a good example. It might have been like a little bit of a unicorn just because of how gutted it was. But yeah, so I'll drop that time there, and then I'll show you guys, you know, like a medium boost pass on my white 370Z. I think it was like a 6.3 something, 60 to 130, and I'll show you guys the pass that did it, and that's just like kind of like a medium boost. It was a little bit more like on the spicier end, but it wasn't my high boost kill map. And yeah, you know, there's obviously a big difference in those times there. You know, half a second is a big deal in racing. I would say my car is currently not gutted. You know, like maybe the stuff in the trunk is taken out, like spare tire, jack, stuff like that, a little bit of the plastics. But it's nowhere near as gutted as the Black Sea was. There was stuff cut, sawzalled, you know, like fully removed, sound deadening, everything. Like I was going crazy with that car. I don't know what was wrong with me at that time. You live and you learn. But yeah, I would say 60 to 130 roll racing stuff, turbo all day. Quarter mile, I would still give it turbo all day. You know, there's a lot of space that, you know, somebody that might jump out on you in the 8th mile, they're not going to finish you.
Hey, yo, what the fuck?
In the quarter, you're just going to fly past them in the end. I would say if you're doing 8th mile racing, that's maybe where you might want a supercharger. You know, there's some guys out there like OF Drive. He has a nasty 350Z. I think it's Soho Motorsports that he got his kit from. I'm not quite sure. I could be completely wrong. But I'll post one of his videos here of him racing, and that is a nasty car. 8th mile, nasty. Quarter mile, I don't know what it ran. It might have did actually a good quarter mile time, you know, so I don't want to hate on him before we post the video just because I have no clue. But quarter mile, 60 to 130, roll racing, turbo all day. So I'm going to say it's 3 to 2, and I say Supercharger does hold up pretty good. That's more like a everyday enthusiast kind of car, but turbo is if you're going balls to the walls trying to make all the power kind of thing. So yeah, we'll throw that there, and I'll have you guys watch that clip of them real quick, you know, so you guys can, you know, see that there are fast supercharged cars out there, but for me and probably the rest of the world, turbocharger takes the cake. So yeah, enough of me yapping. You know, enjoy his little clip real quick, and appreciate you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment down below for more videos. Peace.